Content warning. Episodes of Gray Matter may contain themes and depictions of extreme mental illness, traumatic bodily harm, and death. If you aren't in the right headspace to engage with those depictions right now, maybe this episode should wait for another time. Otherwise, proceed with caution.
Hello there. Welcome back to Gray Matter Video, the only interdimensional museum of the macabre, for whom the entry fee is a 2-day rental. Like most museums, this store is a gallery of one-of-a-kind art, each piece selected and curated for maximum effect on the unsuspecting public. But what makes good art? And what makes a good artist? Is it the fine motor skills, the technical knowledge of which exact shapes and colors appeal to the human eye? Or is it the inspiration, the primal psycho-spiritual connection that the artist has to their work? Maybe it's all of it. Or maybe it's just one thing. The artist's ability to render objective truth through the lens of the subjective experience, to see through a glass darkly and end up with light on the other side. But is objectivity possible? Or even preferable? Or is the false belief in our own objectivity the exact thing that keeps us from achieving it? Well, as per usual, I have a tape that might help answer that question. It's called Pickman's Model, and it's about an artist with some unusual inspirations, and the reporter who he'd like very much to share them with. Pickman's Model. Written and directed by Jonathan Inbody, and adapted from the short story of the same name by H.P. Lovecraft.
If you know anything about the current state of the fine arts in Boston, you may be familiar with a man named Richard Upton Pickman. Pickman is tall and lean, with short hair and a handsome, clean-shaven face. He often wears black tailored pants and a matching vest, over a white button-down shirt with rolled-up sleeves. On the night of August 18th, in the Art of the Americas wing of the Museum of Fine Arts, a special exhibition was held featuring Pickman's most recent work, along with selected pieces from artists he described as influences. As the event wound down and drunken socialites waited while their cars were brought around, Pickman stood in front of one of his paintings, staring up at it with his arms crossed. I watched him silently as his eyes flitted back and forth across the canvas, then stepped over to his side and cleared my throat.
Yes?
Richard Pickman? I'm Ellie Thurber from the Globe. I spoke to your manager on the phone.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that was tonight. You're the one that writes all of those Art Speaks profiles.
I am.
They're very good. You capture things most people miss. Should we go somewhere for the interview, or...
Oh, right here's fine. All of the hustle and bustle will be good for the piece. It's okay that I'm recording this, right?
Of course. I'll make sure to tell you if anything I'm saying needs to stay off the record. Trade secrets, you know.
I do. You were looking at that painting before. Are you unhappy with it?
Oh, we're getting right into it, huh? Well, to be honest, I'm not overly fond of the MFA's lighting choices. They make the colors pop, but they make my work look, I don't know, grotesque, unrealistic.
I looked up at the painting, trying to work out what it was he meant. The trademark Gore didn't bother me, as I was already intimately familiar with his style, but the emaciated figure at the center of the painting still gave me pause. It was another of what he called ghouls, hairless, elongated, and vaguely humanoid in form, with a stretched-out cat-like head and long, pointed ears, like some unholy mix of rat, sphinx cat, and Rottweiler. This one was holding an exquisitely painted human child, digging two clawed hands into its pudgy body and biting into the back of its head. Lines of bloody brain matter stretched from the cracked open skull to the ghoul's toothy mouth, and the creature's bloodshot eyes stared down at the screaming child with desperate hunger. Above it, crisscrossing metal girders sat underneath a blackened skylight, casting a perfect prism of moonlight down onto the creature's head. It looks pretty realistic to me.
Thank you, but I'm not terribly satisfied. Did you see the way people are looking at my work tonight? Like a novelty. Like they're trashy posters for a monster movie or something.
Well, you do paint monsters. But I'm sure people said the same thing about Goya when he made the black paintings. Those were an influence on your ghoul series, weren't they? This piece, Ghoul Feeding, reminds me a lot of Saturn devouring his son.
Well, it's more Rubens' Saturn than it is Goya's. But I appreciate the comparison. And for the record, I don't paint monsters. I paint animals. Nature may be monstrous, but all I'm trying to do is faithfully recreate it.
Like you did with your photography?
Yes, the technique has changed, but not the subject. In many ways, I'm still a photographer. But what I capture now doesn't exist.
Now, obviously, you've been criticized before for your photography work, most infamously for the so-called crocodile photo from your time in Africa. Is the backlash you received for that piece the reason that you moved into painting?
Look, people don't understand what that was. There's this feeling out there that I could have prevented what happened, like I had thrown the child into the water myself. But that couldn't be further from the truth. I had heard that children had died in the river before. So I camped out near the riverbank with my guide, and I waited. And eventually, horrifically, I got lucky. I heard the screams, ran to the river, and snapped the photo. But I assure you, anyone who has seen that picture knows the child was already dead. There was nothing I could have done, and even if there had been, it wouldn't have been my place to. All I do is document reality. It's not my job to judge it. But, to answer your question, yes, that is why I turned to painting. I thought that if people were uncomfortable with my fascination with natural violence, that I'd transition to rendering fictional violence as naturally as I could instead. I think what I do is important. Society needs to be reminded of the harsh state of nature.
So the ghouls are...
Well, they're nature personified. They're perfect hunting machines. I mean, in their own way. A feline agility and grace, a simian intelligence and bone structure, a crocodilian hunger. I like to think that my ghouls are eminently natural, or at least plausible as part of the natural world.
I find it interesting that all of your ghouls are female. Is that a conscious choice?
Sort of, yes. I conceptualized them as survivors of a dying pack, or the last of an intelligent species in decline, where the males have all been killed and the females now have to fend for themselves. But, you know, it's not what they were made for, so they've resorted to hunting helpless prey or cannibalizing each other. So, they're natural creatures, but also sort of a perversion of nature.
Are you suggesting that female animals that hunt are unnatural? Because in lion prides, the lionesses are.
Just not everything is about gender. In nature, the men hunt and the women raise young. It is simple biology, hunters and gatherers. So, with my ghouls, they've adapted outside of the natural order, and as a result, they're scavengers, carrion eaters, always hungry, always killing, never raising young.
What about the industrial setting? Most of the paintings have rusted floors or metal crossbeams. Your piece, Ghoul Ascending, even has one of the creatures scaling a fire escape on the outside of a building. Is that part of the distinction, too? That they're perversions of nature, as you called them, in a purely unnatural world?
That's exactly it. A twisted shadow of the apex predator hunting in an urban jungle. It just feels wrong.
Richard!
Good to see you up and about, Carter.
I had another dream, Pickman, and you were in it. You won't believe it. It was...
I'd love to hear all about it, Carter. But later. Right now, I'm being interviewed.
Sure, sorry. I'll get out of your hair. Are you gonna show her the studio?
Well, I was thinking about it.
You should. That place could use a woman's touch. Well, other than the...
You're drunk, Carter.
So? I'm always drunk. But I can take a hint. Call me tomorrow, huh?
I will.
So, your studio.
Did you bring your coat? It's a beautiful night for a walk.
A few minutes later, Pickman and I were walking down empty city streets towards the industrial district. He looked charmed, almost giddy, answering my questions with a smile on his face and a gleam in his eye. I had texted my roommate to tell her who I was with and the general direction I was headed, and left location services active on my phone. But the further we walked from the museum, the more anxious I got. There was something tense about him, tightly wound. At least I had my mace. Did you grow up in Boston?
Oh, no. I came here for college and fell in love with the city. I was born in Arkham, up in Essex County. My dad and I lived there till he died.
What about your mother?
She was, she left us when I was just a kid. I don't even really remember her. I only really talked to her once. She called the house after my dad died, asked how I was doing. But she didn't really care. I think she just thought she was supposed to.
That's tough.
For a kid?
For anyone.
Yeah, well, her leaving pretty much destroyed my dad. He tried to take care of me, but he was just, I don't know, wasting away, killing himself with liquor.
Hey, is that the building you used as reference for Ghoul Ascending? That fire escape looks familiar.
It is. You've got a good eye. Have you ever tried photography?
No, that's not for me. I like painting word pictures.
I hope that's not what you call it on your resume.
No, not quite. So are we close? To your studio?
We're about halfway. It's not exactly the best part of town, I know. But that's where the real estate market starts being reasonable. Or at least as close to reasonable as the city gets nowadays. The building actually used to be a warehouse. I bought it on the cheap because it was falling apart. I'm excited to show it to an outsider. I feel like you'll be able to appreciate it more than most.
Well, as we walk, why don't we talk more about the origin of the Ghoul series? My understanding is that after the controversy in Africa, when you lost your agent and management company, you sort of went underground.
You have done your research. But, yes, I thought it was for the best that I avoid as much of the public outrage as I could. I still owned my father's house in Arkham, and not too many people knew me there, so I went back.
What was it like?
Depressing. We lived up in the hills in the middle of nowhere, across from a graveyard. And the house, well, when I started college, I pretty much left it to rot. Needless to say, I wasn't in much better shape myself. I briefly picked up my father's knack for self-destructive drinking, and on the back of a mean hangover, I took paint to canvas. And all of those ugly parts of my humanity, they just poured right out of me, took on a feral, primal form that I understood. It felt like getting in touch with a memory or an ancestry, or the part of our nature that stalks us in the dark when we think that we're alone. I just saw them.
And that's when you painted the first two in your series, correct? They're still some of the most controversial. Subway accident and The Lesson.
That's right. They just came to me, crystal clear. That was before I had decided the series would be modern. So they're both a little old-fashioned. Maybe late 1800s, early 1900s-ish. I had this image in my head of a deep, dark world beneath our streets and cities. This vast stone catacomb where monstrous, primordial things lurked and lingered. I just couldn't stop thinking about it. This strange ontology of a world we paved over. Maybe they were mostly sealed in, except for a few little pockets and tunnels where they would come up to feed. You know, maybe they'd survived by eating each other. First feasting, then copulating in vast black piles to make next year's meat. But maybe, even though they could eat each other, they preferred the taste of us. And so sometimes they come up to wander and stalk. So, a subway accident was just a thought experiment. What if something punched through to their world, or some part of ours fell in, and the ghouls spilled out? Ate the survivors of a train crash before rescue crews could get to them.
I can't deny it's effective. The Lesson, though, that one really upset people. The idea of the ghouls raising a human child, and the gore, the body they were teaching the kid to eat. I mean, weren't you afraid that it would remind people of the crocodile photo?
Not really, no. You see, people love fictional violence. Even real violence, presented in a fictionalized way. And they love it for the same reason they think they hate real violence. Because they can't look away. There's no difference. Not really. Whether you're talking about car crashes or... And here it is.
Pickman gestured towards a huge, squat warehouse in front of us, grinning like a cat showing off a dead mouse. When he could tell I wasn't impressed, his smile faded a little.
The inside is a lot more photogenic. Sturdy, though, isn't it?
That's a lot of padlocks.
My work is valuable, and I'm a cautious man.
Oh, God.
Sorry about the smell. This place wasn't exactly built to breathe.
Are there lights in here? I'm just... Ow. What is this, a glass wall?
You're going to want to step back from that.
Oh my god. On the other side of the thick wall of glass, past my own reflection, were 3 of Pickman's ghouls in the horrific flesh. They were squinting, staring up at the harsh light shining down on them from above, but their forms were unmistakable. They had the same yellow, hairless, and wrinkled skin, the emaciated bone structure, the rat-like black eyes that sat sunken in their feline heads with canine snouts, and long, thin ears that flattened against their scalps as they hissed at the ceiling. Their razor-sharp teeth gleamed in the light. Each one sat atop a messy, nest-like pile of newspapers and half-shredded pillows, and the rusted floor around them was spotted with the jagged fragments of discarded bones. Scattered around the glass enclosure behind them were fake gravestones, with a fog machine badly hidden inside a false stone steadily pouring out billows of thin mist that covered the floor. I turned to look at Pickman, who was standing next to the fuse box with an almost childlike smile on his face. He looked at my expression and his smile broadened, his lips parting to reveal an unsettling grin.
They're beautiful, aren't they?
What are they?
Ghouls, Karen eaters, the apex predators of the dead.
Where did they come from?
I told you before, I saw them. One night at the house in Arkham, I was drinking on the porch, and as I sat there, watching, halfway to a blackout and barely conscious, I saw shadows skulking in the graveyard. They were moving between the stones, congregating in the shadows of the mausoleums. They were real, just like I'd been painting. The next morning, I tried to tell myself that I hadn't really seen what I knew I saw, and when I couldn't convince myself, I went walking in the graveyard. I found claw marks, worn down stones where they'd been sharpening their teeth. It only took me an hour or two to find out where they'd been coming up. A toppled mausoleum at the back of the graveyard. The stone floor had collapsed into an underground tunnel, and either the light or the fresh air must have drawn their attention. When I climbed down, I found myself in a system of underground caves. And then I found them. They were huddled together in a rough sort of building carved out of the rock. I know the enclosure is crude, but I tried to replicate their natural habitat the best I could. It's not exactly a zoo.
They're monsters.
Animals.
But you've... I looked around at the huge plexiglass cage, then up at the metal scaffolding that had been constructed around the top of it. At various points along the metal railing lining the open top of the cage were mounted cameras, sitting under studio lighting rigs that were hanging from the ceiling.
I told you before, I still really think of myself as a photographer. I mean, my paintings are good, but I wish I could just show everyone the reference material.
You take pictures, and then you recreate them with paint.
That's right.
But that means...
That's right. I let them out at night to hunt.
Are you going to feed me to them?
Why would I do that? Oh my God. Did you think I was going to hurt you? I I just thought you'd understand. You were so familiar with my work, my technique.
I was doing a story on you. I'm a reporter, Richard.
But you saw my work. You really saw it. I told you about my mother.
You know this is wrong. What you're doing, it's fucked up. If these things can think...
Okay, look. This got off on the wrong foot. These things, I saved them. By the time I found them, they had picked every corpse in the cemetery clean. The bottoms of the graves had been crumbling into the tunnels for, who knows, decades, maybe centuries. They were scavenging alone, out in the hills in the backwoods of Arkham, scrambling back to their caves like roaches when the sun came up. I watched them for weeks, dragging roadkill and dead deer through the stones and down into the dark. It was always the females, never the males. I just couldn't understand it. I had seen it all so clearly. Their teeming caverns, their way of predatory life. It was as if they had whispered it directly into my mind. They must have. How else could I have seen it? And then suddenly, finally, I understood. They had been hunters, and they had been strong. But now the males were dead, and the females had to fend for themselves, all alone in their dark, childless caves. After a few generations, they had lost their culture, their intelligence, and now they were starving. That's why they called me, because they understood they needed a protector, a provider. They showed me visions of their golden age so that I could understand the depths they had sunk to. So I captured them, had them shipped back to the city where I could take care of them and they could inspire me. Sure, it took a little time to properly train them at first. They wouldn't even eat if they couldn't smell the dead. But once they had a taste for fresh meat like nature intended, they're at the top of the food chain here. No one cares about a missing person or two. Not on this side of town. Can't you see how perfect it is? Living testaments to nature's cruelty, immortalized in acrylics.
What if the males were just deeper in the tunnels?
What?
The males. The male ghouls. What if the females did the hunting and the males stayed in their caves to raise their young? What if that's why you never saw them?
But that's not... Men are strong. Women are caring. Hunters and gatherers. That's what they're supposed to be. That's nature.
Was your father strong? That's what you mean, isn't it? You're talking about him. But he was weak, wasn't he? And that's why your mother left him. You have to believe that, because otherwise you have to admit that she just didn't care enough.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Really?
Yes, you critics are so fucking smug. Things can't just be what they are. Art can't just be what it is. It's got to have social context. Because God forbid someone makes something that doesn't play to your precious sensibilities. God forbid people have to face a harsh reality for once.
Listen, I get it. Your mom hurt you, your dad too. That'll fuck anybody up. But you can't let that make you into a monster. Society didn't do this to you. If these things are just animals, sicking them on innocent people won't fix whatever part of you is broken. And if they're intelligent, then you're nothing but a kidnapper.
Shut up!
Or what, Richard? Are you going to put me in my place, like you did with them? I pointed at the ghouls behind the glass. At my sudden movement, they lowered, hunching their shoulders up to their necks as they fanned their clawed hands out. I knew that look, that posture. They were ready to pounce. Is that part of the thrill of it, Pickman? Keeping them in a cage, locking all the doors so they can't ever leave you?
You know something? I changed my mind. I am going to let them eat you.
What?
I thought you understood. It's nature, just like the crocodile. I'm not killing anyone. I'm just letting the food chain run its course. There's such beauty in the last moments of a life. All of that horror, confusion, betrayal, and also that desperate, ignorant denial. People, animals. At the end, they're all thinking the same thing. This isn't supposed to happen to me. I've found that expression stays in the eyes.
Pickman flipped a switch underneath the fuse box. I turned to look at the far end of the glass cage, where a hinged panel at the back of the enclosure slowly started to slide open. As wisps of fog rolled out into the empty warehouse, the ghouls skittered over to the opening door and excitedly growled and yipped. Flecks of hot drool dripped down their feline chins in anticipation of the hunt. No. Of the feeding. You're a fucking psycho. You know that?
That's what they said about Van Gogh.
The panel slid fully open and locked into place as the three ghouls bounded out, scrambling around the side of the glass cage with ravenous eyes. I looked past Pickman at the metal door to the street and weighed my odds.
The door's a little heavy for a woman, but you're welcome to try. Or take them for a run. They could use the exercise.
I turned and sprinted past Pickman and across the empty warehouse. I could hear the ghouls gaining behind us, but why wasn't he running? I turned my head as I ran and watched as Pickman pulled a small portable light from his pocket and held it out towards the approaching ghouls. He waited as they bore down on him, and at the last possible second, his finger flipped the switch. Bright, strobing flashes blasted out from his hand, and the ghouls recoiled, skidding to a sudden stop on the metal floor as they hissed at the blinding light. Pickman raised his other hand and pointed at me, then smiled as the ghouls bounded past him in my direction. Intelligent or not, the smug bastard really did have them trained. I ran up a thin metal staircase leading to a second-floor office overlooking the factory floor. I slammed my shoulder against the rusted door, then tried again when it didn't budge, and all the while I could hear the feral scraping of the ghouls getting closer by the second. Finally, the door gave and I ducked inside. When I started to push it closed again, I glanced out across the warehouse and saw Pickman casually stroll over to a metal ladder on the side of the glass cage. He gingerly climbed it as I watched, and I followed his gaze over to a camera mounted on the metal catwalk above him. He reached the top of the scaffolding just as I forced the rusted door closed and pressed myself against its back. I only had a second or two to catch my breath. Those things would be on me soon, and I had to be ready. Shit! The creatures slammed themselves against the door, almost knocking me off my feet with each hit. I could hear them outside, hissing and growling as I braced myself. The door wouldn't hold for long. They'd be inside soon, ripping, slashing, biting. Pickman would get his reference photos all right, as the ghouls dragged me kicking and screaming back to their see-through cage, where they could spend days picking the meat off my bloody bones. I couldn't help but wonder what he'd call the painting. Leftovers? I hit the floor as the door gave way and rolled onto my back, wrapping my arms around my face to protect it. In a second, the ghouls were on me, tearing through my sleeves and slashing through the meat of my arms. Soon they'd be scraping at the bone. I felt a clawed hand dig into my shoulder like a meat hook, then felt a horrible tug as it dragged me towards the broken door. I thrashed as they pulled me to the top of the metal stairs, kicking at a ghoul as it nipped at my legs. My hand went to my pocket and came up with a can of mace, my thumb already on the trigger, and as a ghoul lunged its head forward to sink its teeth in, I sprayed. The creature reared back, clawing desperately at its burning eyes, then lost its balance and toppled down the stairs. Another ghoul shot forward and I elbowed it in the jaw, dislodging a few jagged teeth, then kicked both my feet up into its stomach to create some distance. As it staggered, my hand shot out and maced it. The thing stumbled back and collided with the third, sending the two of them flipping over the metal railing and plunging to the floor. I looked down, and my face fell when I realized they'd landed on their feet. I sprinted down the stairs as they recovered and tore across the warehouse while they bounded after me, and by the time I had leapt onto the metal ladder to the catwalk above the cage, they were almost nipping at my heels. I could hear Pickman's camera clicking above me and see the flashes out of the corner of my eye. He was probably tickled pink. The ghouls scrambled to the bottom rungs of the ladder and sprang up, clawing at my legs as I reached out for a grip on the catwalk. My fingers curled around the edge of the metal railing and I swung my legs up, then tucked in and pulled myself up off the ladder. As I rose to my feet, I turned to look at the mounted camera that Pickman was standing behind. I stumbled back, blinded by the sudden flash, and started to blink and squint to clear my vision. I could hear the ghouls clambering up the ladder behind me, each one fighting the others to be the first one up. There was no time to think. All I could manage was animal instinct. I charged forward across the swaying scaffolding, shooting a hand up to block my eyes as Pickman tried to blind me with another flash. When I got close, I stuck a shoulder out and dove underneath the camera mount, catching Pickman in the gut and knocking him off his feet. The camera broke out of place, and the metal mount dropped, bouncing off the scaffolding before crumpling when it hit the floor of the glass cage. Pickman fell against the thin metal railing and started to flip, but before he fell, he shot a hand out and grabbed my collar. We teetered on the inner edge of the scaffolding, dangling over the open top of the glass enclosure, neither one of us able to act against the other without killing us both. I wrapped my hands around the metal railing, and I felt his freshly shined shoes slide back and forth on the metal beneath us as he tried and failed to gain a steady foothold.
What's the matter, Richard? You don't want to suffer for your art?
No, I think it's much better if you do it.
My collar's not going to hold on much longer. Call them off, and I'll pull you up.
Pull me up, or I'm taking you down with me.
The scaffolding creaked loudly and began to shake. As it began to sway, I looked over my shoulder to see that the ghouls had made it up. The metal walkway was buckling, shifting dangerously under their weight. The ghoul in front lowered onto all fours and crept forward, its black, feral eyes staring at me through burning tears. Its ears fanned back and its snout flared open, bearing two overlapping rows of crooked, razor-sharp teeth. Suddenly, a glint of reflected light caught my eye and I looked down. There, just past Pickman's foot, sat the fallen camera. It was sliding as the scaffolding rocked, only seconds from falling off altogether. But even with a broken lens, I was willing to bet I could set off the flash. Pickman eyed me strangely, then followed my eyes down. He swept his foot out to kick the camera off the edge, and as I dove down to catch it on pure reflex, I felt the last shred of my collar tear free. I whirled, yanking the camera up to face the ghouls, then looked back to see that the catwalk behind me was empty. I could hear Pickman screaming from below, and as I turned my head back to the ghouls in front of me, I could tell they heard it too. They were frozen, stretched fully upright like cats as their long ears telescoped up and out. After a few long seconds, their backs slowly arched again as they turned to look down into their cage. On the cluttered ground in the glass enclosure, Pickman was crawling over piles of scattered newspapers and knocking over fake gravestones, crying out in pain as he dragged a broken, bleeding leg behind him.
Don't look at me! It's her! Kill her! Kill her now, you ungrateful strays!
A ghoul leapt onto the metal railing in one smooth, cat-like motion, then sprang out into the air and dove down into the cage. It landed on all fours a few feet behind him, then began to slowly circle, arching its back and hissing as it sniffed the smeared blood trailing up to his leg.
Not me! Not me! I saved you! I feed you!
The other two ghouls padded cautiously to the edge of the scaffolding, watching silently as their red-eyed leader circled Pickman. Then they leapt down to follow her, flanking out at her sides like mangy lionesses falling into a hunting party. On the catwalk, I lowered the camera and rose to my feet, staring down at them with a combination of horror and awe. At the bottom, Pickman looked up and met my gaze.
Please, you have to help me.
It's not my job to judge, Richard. It's just nature. And nature is cruel.
I stared, wide-eyed, as the ghouls tore Pickman apart, as they ripped off bloody strips of skin and muscle and gnawed his thrashing limbs down to the bone. His screams turned to helpless gurgles, then gasps, and finally he went silent. The ghouls kept eating, plucking out his vacant eyes and crushing them like grapes before scraping bits of brain out of empty sockets with their long claws, like fingers scooping up cheese dip. Pickman, for all his faults, was right about one thing. There was something beautiful about it. Some purity. The strong devouring the weak. The thorough, permanent reduction of a living thing to wet, raw material. And although it made me sick, although it sent a chill down my spine and raised the hair on the back of my neck, I couldn't help but take a picture.
Pickman's Model was written and directed by Jonathan Inbody, and adapted from the short story of the same name by H.P. Lovecraft. It was edited by Jeffrey Lavin, with music composed and performed by Samantha Hunt. Ellie Thurber, the narrator, was played by Charleston Harvey. Richard Pickman was played by Mark Bogumil, and Jonathan Inbody played Carter.
Gray Matter is a Word Search Media production. Any similarities to real people, places, or things is purely coincidental.
If you like the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And support us at patreon.com/graymatterhorror.
Be kind. Rewind.